sometimes you're asked to import other people's work. Now there are several ways of doing that. A very common and helpful thing is something called the EPS importer. We go to our File menu, select Import, we select EPS Loader. Now the EPS Loader will attempt to load an EPS file. Now EPS is something that you'd get like from Illustrator. It ends in either EPS or sometimes AI. So we select the object. We have the option Superfine, Fine, Standard, and Rough. It depends on the object being loaded. There is also the problem that there is now a point limit to objects that can get you in trouble when you're working with finely detailed graphics. So I'm going to select Superfine in this case, and this brings in my object. This happened to be an EPS created by an ex-student of mine. Now you see what has happened is that even though this was created as an EPS file in many layers, it brought it all into a single layer. And if we look at the solid shaded, we can see it looks like just a solid piece. So we're going to switch this to texture wire, and we can see what we have here. So what you would do in Lightwave, once this is brought in, let's say this is just the logo. I'm going to switch to Polygon Mode, and I can select these to a cut and paste. And I still have probably more than I want to deal with. I might want to actually break these into 3 separate layers. In fact, let's do at least one of them. I'm going to cut and paste. Once I have that, I can treat it just like I had done it originally. Extrude it, select the front, bevel it. I can see it's very tight up here, so I need to be careful. Open up my numeric. Yeah, inset is way too much. There, so it looks like. So that's what I would do with an EPS file. It's very common today. If you're working on a job for a company, their logo exists somewhere in an EPS file, in an EPS format. The problem is they keep changing the EPS format when they export it, and sometimes the newer files will not load up into the EPS loader. Sometimes you have to load them into Illustrator or what have you and save them out as, say, version 7 or version 8. There are various things that can upset the EPS loader. One of the things we found is if there's a gradient applied. Now the gradient doesn't make any difference at all to the EPS loader because you see none of the color comes through. We're just looking for geometry. So if you can get your client or do it yourself, load it up and save it as an earlier format, then you're pretty well set. Now the other things you can import some other object formats. Now you may not necessarily see them because they import them automatically now, but some of the different files types that Lightwave can import, 3ds with it, which is some 3D Studio formats, DXF, encapsulate PostScript, which is EPS, OBJ. Now I've had very little luck bringing in DXF. It'll come in, but it comes in basically 2-dimensional, doesn't save me a lot of work. The 2 formats I've had the most success with is OBJ. Many CAD programs can export to an OBJ format, and that saves you so much work. If you're working on an industrial piece and they have their piece of machinery that can export it as to OBJ, you can bring it right into Lightwave. And a lot of times it's really heavy. It's a big file because there's a lot of detail, but still that's a whole lot better than trying to build it from scratch. The other option is something called an STL format. It stands for stereolithography. Now there is a plugin available, and I suggest you go to flay.com. That's www.flay.com, Anybody working with Lightwave should go there anyway. Do a search for the STL loader. Most modern programs can export in STL format. And now that Lightwave can read that, that makes things a whole lot easier also.